Coming your way on today's Philadelphia Eagles. Now, could the Birds trade James Bradberry to the Jacksonville Jaguars? And then story number 2, according to Jeff McClain of the Philadelphia Inquirer, he talked about this in his podcast, Uncovering the Birds. Are the Eagles disappointed with Jalen Hurts? And how he responded to the questions about Nick Sirianni and the new Sirianni going into 2024. Stay tuned for that. But first, we are closing in on 76,000 subscribers. We are 418 people away. And if you want Eagles shows every single day, join the family, join the movement, and let's do it for 1776. America, Philadelphia, America's birthplace, Declaration of Independence, signed in 1776. America, F yeah! And America also doesn't like the Dallas Cowboys, even though they're supposed to be America's team. And we're having a June sub-battle between these two NFC East rivals, both on the football field and inside the walls of Chat Sports. As you can see, Eagles now has picked up 419 subscribers since June 1. Cowboys report 326. Let's continue to dominate the Cowboys on and off the field. And with that, let's start the show. I'm Chase Sr., this is Eagles Now, and it's all presented and made possible thanks to our friends at Roan. If you're looking to get some new clothes for the summer, Roan is the only answer. I'm wearing their commuter polo right now. I can rock this on air. I can rock it to the golf course when I'm getting in 18 holes, or if I'm going out on the town, taking down some drinks and going out to dinner, get 20% off using the code CHATSPORTS at roan.com/chatsports. So let's talk James Bradberry to start the show here. Could he get traded to the Jacksonville Jaguars? Bleacher Report put together 8 trades that could shock the NFL. And I kind of disagree that a Bradberry trade would shock the NFL if he were to get traded to Jacksonville. Obviously, there is some familiarity there because Doug Peterson is the coach. And it's not necessarily the team that Bradberry goes to here as far as this trade proposal. It is the framework of the trade and the value that the Eagles could get back. So this is what Bleacher Report put together, where the Eagles receive a 2025 6th-round pick for James Bradberry. And then the Jags get Bradberry to kind of bulk up that secondary, which is a little bit better going into 2024 than it was last year. But you look at that deal here, and you look at the value. Do you think that's equal value for James Bradberry? And could the Eagles swing a 6th-round pick for him? Or was he so bad in 2023 that his value is diminished to the point where Philadelphia can't even get a late-round pick? Now, you look at the Eagles' 2025 draft picks, and they are well-equipped and they are well set up for the future because Howie Roseman tied an NFL draft record by making 8 trades back in April. And with those maneuverings, he's able to stockpile a lot of draft compensation. Eagles have their own 1st-round pick, their own 2nd-round pick, their own 3rd-round pick, and then they have a 3rd from the Miami Dolphins. So Philadelphia going into 2025, they're already this year going to be a Super Bowl contender, in my estimation, have 4 picks inside the top 3 rounds. And then after that, they have a 4th from the Lions, their own 5th, a 5th from the Texans, and then they have 2 7th-round picks. You add a 6th-round pick to that, Philadelphia goes into the 2025 draft with 10 total picks if they could make a move like this for James Bradberry. The good thing about where Philadelphia is currently at and where they are positioned is that unlike last year, they are extremely deep at the cornerback position. If you were to look at all other 31 teams in the National Football League, a lot of those teams would be hard-pressed to find the depth that the Eagles have at that cornerback spot, and that's really important considering the Eagles secondary last year, one of the worst in the NFL. And while it's hard to gauge how bad Bradberry was in that disastrous Eagles defensive campaign from 2023, he just didn't look like the same guy, physically and mentally, which brings us back to that question, could you get a 6th-round pick for James Bradberry? Howie Roseman could necessarily just cut his losses, trade him away for pennies on the dollar and say, you know what? We signed him going into 2022. And he was worth it then because he was a second-team All-Pro. Him and Darius Slay were one of the top cornerback duos in the NFL, and it yielded us an NFC Championship game victory. We were NFC champs, and an appearance in the Super Bowl. And, of course, Bradberry played a role in that Super Bowl defeat. And then last year he was terrible. You can spread out the remaining years on his contract if you do decide to let him go. But if you trade him away, you could also kind of just get rid of that contract, and it puts you in a much better position. It is wild how much Bradberry fell off from 2022 to 2023. Sometimes you see this decline from running backs. They lead the league in rushing, and then the next year, because of the toll that their body has taken, they fall off the cliff. You don't always see that at the quarterback spot. Sometimes it is a dip in production, a dip in play that takes place over the course of a few years. But Bradberry 2 years ago, a second-team All-Pro, and last year he looked like just a terrible cornerback. He had an overall Pro Football Focus grade 2 years ago, 74.1. Coverage grade of 80.2. Passer rating of 54.2. 3 picks on 675 coverage snaps. And then last year, 56.5 overall grade, 54.7 coverage grade. Allowed a passer rating more than double what he surrendered in 2022 of 108.6. Only 1 pick. And then the coverage snap sample size, very, very similar. Another reason why the Eagles have flexibility here, regardless of if they keep Bradberry, trade him, or cut him, either way they have $25.7 million in cap space. So adding a sixth is kind of like, okay, we're still good at the cornerback spot, and we get that 6th-round pick. We'll certainly take it. Here was Bleacher Report's reasoning and their explanation behind that trade. This trade would be shocking, not in that the Eagles would move on from Bradberry. That feels more inevitable by the day. The shock would be that a player who just 2 years ago was a second-team All-Pro, who also has a Pro Bowl on his resume, would all but be given away. But perhaps a change of scenery would rekindle his career, and an improved Jaguars secondary would help their chances of keeping up with the Texans and their loaded cadre of pass catchers. So would you trade Bradberry for a 6th? It really is pennies on the dollar here, but do you cut your losses and then you open up the opportunity for Kelee Ringo, Isaiah Rodgers, Cooper DeJean, Quinion Mitchell to play a little bit more? Type T for trade, P for pass. That's today's poll question. I want to see where you're at. So story number 1, Bradberry. Trade to the Jags or for a 6th-round pick. Wanted to discuss that. Coming up just around the corner, are the Eagles disappointed with their franchise quarterback, Jalen Hurts? Stay tuned for that conversation. First, I told you off the top that today's Eagles Now is sponsored by Roan. Summertime is here. If you're looking to get some new clothes, make sure you check out Roan. And if you use the code CHATSPORTS by going to roan.com/chatsports, you get 20% off your order. As I mentioned, I'm wearing the Roan Commuter Polo on today's show. I love this shirt because it's light, it's flexible, it's durable, it's extremely comfortable, and I can tell that this is made out of high-quality fabric. They have wrinkle release technology where the more that you wear these shirts, the more that wrinkles disappear. And it's not just for this one, it's for all of their products. I'm tired of wearing some of the cheap stuff that just diminishes in value and then just doesn't last long in general after a couple of wears. With Roan shirts, these shirts will last you years, and you'll look good, you'll feel good in the process. So get 20% off your order. Everything from golf polos to button-up shirts that you can wear with the suit, without a suit, night out on the town, taking down some drinks with your girl, your homies, or you're going to the golf course or your corner office comfort. They're pants and shorts. You can't beat those either. 20% off using the code at ChatSports. So we talked about this a little bit last week, where Jalen Hurts, and we set the foundation here, was asked what he noticed about Nick Sirianni being open-minded enough to change the offense, bring in Kellen Moore, and if Sirianni deserves credit for taking accountability and changing the offense because it was his scheme that Sirianni was running in his first 3 years in Philadelphia. Hurts then responded in an awkward way where he's asked, what do you think about the new Sirianni? He said, and then there was a long pause. He had a little chuckle, and then he answered it kind of in a weird way. And we know who Jalen Hurts is and how he acts in these press conferences in public settings. He's not the easiest person to read. He can be coy, short, stoic, never really reveals much. You could tell that he's a coach's son. Coach speak, right? You think about that where coaches never really give anything away. Jalen Hurts, his dad, high school coach, and he kind of carries himself like that. Coach speak, where he just doesn't really give you any breadcrumbs, any nuggets, but sometimes his actions are hard to read. So you're like, what is Jalen Hurts thinking? How does he feel about this? And this felt something along the lines of, Hurts, what do you think about the new Nick Sirianni? Kind of like when somebody asks you, do you want to marry her? And if there's an, not sure if I want to marry her. Usually you should know if that person is the love of your life, right? Usually you know the answer to that question. And if you don't, maybe it's an indication you're not sure you want to marry that individual. So it's not great, right? When somebody asks you about your head coach changing and you don't really have an answer. And here was the exchange. I mean, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to it. I think he's just been great in the messages he's delivering to the team. He's trying to be very intentional what he's saying. Then there was another pause, and then he said, yeah. And then the press conference awkwardly continued. That is a very awkward way, and I think it's worth discussing this a little bit because remember what Hurts said when he was asked last year if you wanted Sirianni back when the Eagles are free-falling, they're collapsing, there's locker room drama, there are sideline spats, and Hurts didn't really give his head coach a vote of confidence. I didn't know he was going anywhere. I didn't know that. What you could do instead of that, yes, I give a lot of credit to Nick Sirianni changing. It's not easy being an offensive mind to bring in a new offensive coordinator and allow him to steer the ship, take the keys to the offense, and do his own thing. But I give credit to Coach for doing that because he's trying to put us in a position to win. You have to be malleable. You have to make adjustments. You have to adapt and evolve. Or last year, I want Nick Sirianni back. We were just in the Super Bowl last year. I love Nick Sirianni. I think he's a great coach. There was none of that from Jalen Hurts, which then brings us to what Jeff McClain said in the Philadelphia Inquirer on his Uncovering the Birds podcast, which is a great documentary series style type of pod. He said, it was, needless to say, an awkward exchange. Hurts was given the opportunity to say something constructive about his coach and ended up not saying much at all. Maybe he misunderstood the question. I don't want to make too much of the moment, but if Hurts has shown anything during his time in Philadelphia, it's that he's intentional in almost everything that he does. According to team sources, his handling of this question about Sirianni right before the Eagles parted before the summer disappointed several key figures within the organization. Now, disappointed several key figures within the organization. Who could Jeff McClain be talking about? I would imagine it's Jeffrey Lurie, the owner, and Howie Roseman, the general manager. And I could see the owner and the GM saying, Jalen, we're in the pressure cooker of Philadelphia. You have to know better than to stir drama right before there's a long break because you know that the thirsty media, which I'm a part of, is going to eat this up during a dry spell where there's no football for a month and a half before training camp. And as a franchise quarterback, you can answer the question a little bit better. You can conduct yourself a little bit better during these media gatherings. It was a toss-up for you to compliment your coach, to construct your head coach, and you kind of just left meat on the bone for the conversation of, is Jalen Hurts unhappy with Nick Sirianni? Because last year, there seemed to be a little bit of a gap, a little bit of a rift between the quarterback and the head coach, and you have to also remember that Nick Sirianni fired Brian Johnson, who Hurts has known since he was a kid. And maybe Hurts feels some type of way about that. If I'm Hurts, I'm like, get Brian Johnson out of here. I got to resurrect my career, get back to that runner-up MVP form and how I was playing in the Super Bowl. Kellen Moore can help me do that. Clearly, Brian Johnson was in over his skis. So we round out with this. Let's hear from you. Is this something? Is this nothing? Let me know down in the comments section. Don't forget to give me a follow on social media. By the way, I'm on X and Instagram at Chase_Senior. The platforms are taking off. Be a part of it, and I appreciate your support.